Serious scientists of Reddit, what is something you desperately want to experiment with, but will make you look like a mad scientist? Attention! Serious, tag notice jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour, and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit /message/compose/?2=r/r/askreddit if you have any questions or concerns. I want to work on genetically modifying the genes that control our active cones in our eyes. Specifically, I want to try to activate a tertiary cone in the eyes of dogs so that they can see infrared light just like snakes can. In simpler terms, we could make rescue dogs that have infrared vision to help locate missing people or recover people in natural disasters. In even simpler terms, I want to make heat-seeking dogs. I work mainly with snake venom, but my friend called me and told me his brother-in-law knows a guy that harvests scorpion venom. It is prohibitively expensive normally, but this guy insisted you didn't have to go through the normal process of acquiring it. So I am imaging a sweatshop situation with various containers of scorpion venom. I feel like buying and possessing an old milk jug of scorpion juice would make me seem mad to say the least. Modifying my butane torch to create a longer stream of fire. It'd basically be a lightsaber but made of fire. I'd love to study language development. For example, stick a bunch of babies on a remote island without outside influence and document how they learn to communicate. According to past research, they'd just die. I'm an infosec guy. Do security researchers count as scientists yet? And I'd love to do social engineering experiments. But they're either illegal or immoral. Can you give an example? I'm chemist, and the answer is anything. Can you even imagine having an unlimited budget for doing HTS and SAR? Especially if you can hire some folks who do good chiral syntheses to explore all the uninvestigated chemical space that gets left behind when everything is aromatic or built on peptide bonds. I'm not a professional scientist in this field, but electrostimulation as a means of regrowing limbs sounds pretty interesting, and I'd love to see the effects on humans. If I recall correctly, one of the problems with this is that the wound site must be kept fresh, and humans bleed out too quickly if their wounds aren't able to clot, which would interrupt the regrowth. I'd like to raise babies in various plant conditions, such as, without any adult human interaction, without language, indoors only, with different concepts of a family unit, with different concepts of gender roles, and many more. Greater than without any adult human interaction. I can save everyone a bit of time on this one. The baby dies. I'm left-handed, and I've always heard lefties are right-brained, creative, and righties are left-brained, logical. I would like to create a school, pre-K to 12th grade, that includes boarding, where the only difference is that everything inside the school, door handles, computer mouses, sports equipment, and scissors, are accommodated for left-handed people. The teachers would all left-handed as well, but the students will be a usual mix of 90% right-handed and 10% left-handed. Would right-handed kids in this environment use their right brain more because they are forced to be more creative? Would the left-handed kids become more right-brained? I experiment on ancient coins. Museums are generally against me doing a full compositional analysis, as that would involve me dissolving the whole coin in acid. But it sure would tell us a lot more than not. It's generally a bummer how many kinds of analyses are destructive. Though I do remember doing a cool experiment in intro chemistry to determine silver content through neutron activation. Lot easier to do when there's a reactor under the site building. Experiments with social isolation intrigue me. Raise a child with no language and see what happens. No contact. Wild children give us some insights, but also a sample of the kind of trauma this can produce. Completely and undeniably unethical. Incredibly cruel. But so intriguing. This have already been done and documented in the past. There was this king who believed that children raised in completely isolation would naturally speak Greek, so to test this he ordered a group of babies to be placed in isolation from adults, and a few times per day midwives would feed/clean them. The result of this experiment was that every single baby died, even although they were being fed. Yeah, infants, especially newborns, have a biological need for attention, or at least a need for connection. I want to take DNA from infamous serial killers like Dahmer or Albert Fish or the like, clone them, then have the baby raised in a normal, supportive, loving family. I'd study the kids all through adulthood to see how much is nurture and how much is nature. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how you turn a mad scientist into a dead scientist. I want Drug Olympics, where everyone using something to enhance performance. To see true limit of humans. Have participated in the Ketamine Olympics many years in a row now, which just involves everyone taking a bunch of K and trying to do basic physical activities. Not exactly what you're referring to, but had some pretty fun results. I want to create miniature elephants. Through ingenious genetic manipulation I'll be able to miniaturize any living mammal. And yeah, I know there's a South Park reference, and also a Jurassic Park, the book, reference. Mostly I want a cuddly mini-fant that I can socialize as a lovely companion. All while spiking municipal water supplies to shrink the general population and go Godzilla on their asses. That's what you get for making fun of my homemade pie, Karen. Animal/human hybrids. Removed. Transhumanism. I want to see a heavier push towards prosthesis and the like. I have a healthy interest in immortality. The moment my consciousness can be put into a computer, I'm doing it. Hell, I'll settle for brain in a jar like in Fallout. Grafting artificial muscles, even though I don't have any qualifications in shit, learning on the job. Removed. Apparently it would reduce their need for food by only 4%, XKCD's what if? https://whatif.xkcd.com/17/ so it wouldn't be very helpful. But a 4% decrease in food is still a lot of land. The typical discovery and clinical testing pipeline of a pharmaceutical looks something like this: cell culture greater than rodent models, greater than other animals, primates, rabbits, etc., greater than humans. If at any step the drug fails the test, either for toxicity or efficacy, the potential drug is nixed. And this process of discovery and clinical testing can take up to 10 years at the cost of billions of dollars. What happens if your model systems can't fully recapitulate the human disease phenotype? So what happens if you've got a drug that might work really well in the human, but we never know, because it gets trashed because there's no response in the mouse model? Now I completely understand the ethical concerns with testing on human subjects from the get-go, but if you asked me to don my mad scientist lab coat and goggles, I'd try to push for earlier testing on human subjects. Yeah, guinea pigs are allergic to penicillin, so if they were used for testing, penicillin could have been rejected. My wife is allergic to penicillin. She continues to tell me she's not a guinea pig, but the evidence is pointing to the contrary. I'd never do the experiment, but it's hard to overstate how helpful it would be to have large-scale, longitudinal data on how different chemotherapeutic drugs/drug cocktails affect the evolutionary trajectory of tumors. The problem is that in order to study it, you'd need to, 1. Give a large number of people experimental or substandard care, which is highly unethical. 2. Perform serial surgeries even when they aren't medically necessary in order to collect tissue samples from the tumors, and since every surgery carries with it some risk, this is also highly unethical. Can't you do this on mice? I would like to try and lengthen my telomeres and see how that affects my personal aging. Long story short, cancer. Wouldn't that decrease the chance of cancer because the telomeres protect the chromosome's DNA? I'd want to know how long it'd take a group of children, raised to puberty, would figure out sex. I'm sure they'd figure out masturbation on some level. But how long would it take for them to figure out tab A into slot B? The kids could be raised about as normal as possible, but with any mentioning of sex and reproduction completely removed. And there would be no shame or deterrent while they figure it out. Like, the caretakers wouldn't tell them we don't do that if they found out one was masturbating or that two consenting teenagers are touching each other. There would be some kind of explanation with trying to encourage that type of stuff in private instead of around the others. I'm just curious about how sex is kind of instinctual in other animals. It doesn't really seem that way with us. We learn from so many different sources nowadays, that we don't need to figure it out ourselves. We have the internet, friends/peers, maybe parents, books, TV, maybe sex ed. What would it be like if we just didn't teach/explain/acknowledge it and see how long it would take for them to figure it out themselves? Twins have very similar DNA. If raised exactly the same way without interaction with each other, would they make the same choices? There have been studies done where separated twins choose the same career, marry a woman by the same name and maybe even call their kids by the same names. It was crazy specific. The thing is, most of these studies find examples of this and then make cases around it. They aren't really experiments, just highly coincidental scenarios that may or may not have a genetic explanation behind them. I would like to clone myself. Nature versus nurture. Sorry dude, you can have as many kids as possible with one woman, but you cannot clone yourself, can't do it even once. Identical twins is totally fine also. I'm where you're at, ethically. I can't see a compelling reason why we shouldn't. In fact, my best guess is that it has already been done, just not revealed out of fear of a PR nightmare. The only ethical issues are if there is some known sickness, which I do not have. But it mostly comes how other people react to it. You are a clone, you sick fuck. Use targeted injections of virally encoded opsins, channel rhodopsin etc., and some simple signal-to-light converters to get ESP. See into the UV or infrared? Sure, why not? Take in Wi-Fi based data or IMF data, cool, let's do it. Anything you can build a detector for, if reasonably small, you could then encode in some area of your brain. Could also swap in and out the detector as needed. Going into the dark? Let's go for some IR. Going for a hike in the woods? How about some inbuilt GPS? I would really love to have a hunk of plutonium in the attic above my bedroom. I mean, the right amount would have to be sussed out first, of course. They found that some buildings in Japan had been made with irradiated steel from stockyards near the blast zones of either Hiroshima or Nagasaki, and the people that lived in them had abnormally long and cancer-free lives, presumably because, there's a scientific term for it, where your body comes into some kind of homeostasis with snake venom over long enough exposure to small doses. They think that's what happened with those people and the radiation as well. Their bodies adapted to it, and became far less prone to have cancer because of it. Also, it would lower my heating bill in the winter. Plus, I really wish we could just use breeder reactors as well. Honestly, I think the government should give them away to property owners, as it would benefit the United States greatly to have a populace of people off the power grid, powering themselves independently, and greenly, with a stable power source that will last 100 plus years for their needs. The economy would benefit, people would be more able to afford housing, and emissions would go down. The term that you're trying to think of is radiation hormesis, and it is far from an accepted scientific principle. Source: am radiochemist/nuclear scientist. Hormesis, yes. That was it. Yeah, I'd still like a little nug up in the roof. Thus the mad scientist bit. Biophysicist here, would love to investigate CRISPR technology in vivo cancer patients, using the technology to block cleavage from occurring at a specific DNA site. I have studied this in vitro, but experimenting in a live human being could be risky waters. Transferring consciousness to a computer so we can live forever. Or reproductive cloning so everyone can have their own organs for transplantation. I mentioned this in stem cell class one day, and I've been the weird girl since. Just organs or the whole body intact, practically alive, but only kept around to service your needs when you need it? If you could clone a whole human body that it came to life and interacted in daily life, Would it still be your spare organ farm or a whole new human? There's also the body/organs having the same predisposition you do, so what if the heart you cloned had the same defaults as your now failing heart? I wouldn't say mad scientist, but medical privacy laws get in the way of a lot of incredibly useful research. Everything has to be so identified and confidential that it makes doing any sort of large-scale statistics nearly impossible. You have to make a ton of assumptions because you can't know many details. If I had full access to everyone's medical records, we could probably fix a whole lot of shit. Several years ago I had the most ridiculous interaction regarding HIPAA. I had applied for a job at a drugstore, and was offered the job. I told the manager I would fail the test, I was taking prescribed narcotics. He told me I couldn't tell him that, it was a HIPAA violation. When I went to take my pre-employment drug test, I took my prescription bottles for the narcotics I was taking, since I knew I would fail the test. They told me I couldn't tell them that information, HIPAA violation. A week later I get a call from the testing company telling me I tested positive for morphine, and asked if I had a valid prescription. I told them I did. They asked me where I had it last filled, and it just happened to be at the Walgreens where I was now testing for. I had gotten the job application while waiting at the pharmacy. Testing company calls drugstore to tell them I failed, and they would follow up. Testing company calls me to inquire about legitimacy of the meds in my system. Testing company asks me where I filled the prescription. I tell them I last filled it at this very drugstore. Testing company then calls drugstore to verify the prescription. Pharmacy manager tells them the script is okay. Testing company then calls the same damn drugstore again to tell them that they themselves verified the prescription. Drugstore then calls me to tell me that my prescription, that I had just gotten from them, was legit. You telling the person hiring you isn't a HIPAA violation because you are the one giving it, offering it, but it's still protected health information and the manager has to keep it confidential. However, the manager giving the information to the drug testing company is a HIPAA violation unless you gave the pharmacy permission to release the info. That could be a whole lawsuit waiting to happen.